and welcome to Fridays with Foster back in the office. I was traveling last weekend for a wedding, and so that's why I shot out of the my quick Fridays with Foster in the airport. Uh, I Let's start with coffee. So I ended up just going through and buying a bunch of Nespresso coffee in the different flavors, even if they were a lower intensity, because the Buenos Aires that I tried was really was surprisingly good, even though it wasn't as intense. So I'm just backing off of that. Intensity equals happiness. It definitely is not the case in most areas of my life. So today we have, if you could see, Tokyo Vivalto Lungo. So by the numbers, it is a 3 out of 5 on roastiness, which, that's my favorite non-word. It's a 1 out of 5 on acidity, which I like, 2 out of 5 on bitterness, and 3 out of 5 on body. So give you the quick read down. It's a highly quality Arabica. It's delivered exceptionally flowery aromas and complex taste worthy of Tokyo's refined palate. Known for tea, the Japanese also have a real affinity for coffee. Did not know that. Striving for sophistication and natural sweetness, which I like, they love both a rich coffee and a balance of elegant aromas. So the origin, it's Ethiopian and washed Mexican Arabicas. Contrasts beautifully to give this lungo a rich flavor, blah, blah, blah. So the roasting process, a little bit different. So it's a shorter, lighter roast. And as we learned from the very first Fridays with Foster, a shorter roast means more caffeine, right? So longer roast, darker taste, but less caffeine. And so the Ethiopian beans are roasted shorter, but they actually roast the Mexican beans a little bit longer. So it kind of, I guess they're trying to balance it out. Okay, enough out of me. Let's try it. That is really good. I actually detect the flowery notes, and it's very balanced, not very bitter. And I guess I'll report in later to see if the caffeine is really where it's at, but very good. All right, so, okay, full disclosure. Today's topic is something that I have struggled with through most of my life. And I'm not embarrassed. I don't really care. Anybody who knows me knows it to be true or knew it to be true. I'm hopefully better or continuing to get better as I grow older and hopefully wiser. So today's topic is don't just talk your way through a conversation. I don't know how to say this without it. I don't think this is, well, I'll just say it. There was a time when I would just love to talk, and not because I love the sound of my own voice, not because I even hear the sound of my own voice, but because for me, I would express my feelings and I would process my thoughts audibly. And there may be some of you, by all means, please comment if you can relate. I'd appreciate that. But aside from that, if you have people in your life and you're just like, oh, they talk too much or they whatever, one of the things that can happen for people when I do hear, not the sound of my voice, right, but when I do hear what I'm saying, when I'm saying it, I'm processing the next thing that I want to say. And so then it actually gives me some kind of a frame of reference, almost, I guess, like a self-conversation, self-monologue, to continue to processing and developing and hearing the ideas and moving to the next one and the next one. And so I think that's the main struggle that I had for the majority of my life up until, not too many years ago, because I would process like that. And we're going to have another Fridays with Foster where we talk specifically about the DISC communication. So anybody who isn't aware of what that is, it's just communication styles. DISC is D-I-S-C. There are 4 main styles of communication, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm actually currently going through my DISC certification right now, but I've been teaching it and learning about it for years. So I absolutely love it. But there are aspects of that too. But for me, a lot of times I like to relate to people based on my natural, biological communication style. I like to communicate with people through stories. And so when I hear you say something that I can relate to, and this is not me really right now, but what it used to be, I hear you say something, I get really excited about it because I like what you're saying. And guess what? I actually did that too. You went to that concert, you saw that band, you did this, you enjoyed that coffee. Oh, I did too. And let me tell you a story about that, because what it's going to do for me is it's going to bring us closer together on an understanding level, maybe not on an interpersonal level necessarily, but you can relate to me, I can relate to you on something very specific, and it's going to bring us closer in understanding, closer in knowing each other. And that's where the conversation comes in and bounces around. The other thing, sometimes people will have that, the puppy mind, right? It's just always everywhere, squirrel, right? That kind of conversation piece. From a professional standpoint, you have to be really careful, because a lot of people don't understand this when they're talking to people, or when they're communicating with people and listening to people, just going off on tangents, right and left. They come back around, and it's not at the end of the world. I mean, these are first world problems, but this has been something that I've struggled with, again, personally for years, and it really hampered my ability to communicate. And what it really did was it put a barrier in between me and other people, and with my clients. So as a business coach, my true purpose, and I'm not just saying this, it's not fluff and it's not a marketing piece. I want to change people's lives. And I do that through coaching. Now, I've done that in different aspects and different roles that I've played in the world. I used to sell guitars. I was the manager of the acoustic guitar department at the Guitar Center in Hollywood. And I would go around, and my purpose in changing people's lives, I said to myself, my job is to match the individuals with the right guitar so they can express themselves and change their lives, right? So I've always had that. What I realized over time is this problem of communicating via talking, consistent talking, has prevented me from actually helping people. When I'm talking, I'm not learning anything, right? Obviously, talking is part of the conversation, but I'm going to paraphrase a great Winston Churchill quote. He said, "A good conversation is like a miniskirt. It's long enough to cover the subject, but short enough to retain interest," right? Calvin Coolidge said, "No man ever listened himself out of a job." That's just not how it works. So it's not just for people, this lesson isn't just for people who seem to talk a lot. This message and the learning today is about communication and intention. Making sure that I am communicating with people so they are heard and I am understanding. I always like to tell people, when you get into a conversation or before then, pause when you're talking. I promise you, you can always say the wrong thing later. You don't have to say the wrong thing right now every time. Most things that come through my mind don't need to be said. They may need to be contemplated, but they don't need to be said. And for somebody who processes things audibly, that can definitely be a challenge. So my wife and I communicate on completely different levels. Honey, if you're listening, I love you. When I say something to my wife, she takes that as a decision or something that we're doing, because if it weren't something we were doing, why would I speak it? For me, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just seeing what happens, right? Just getting a conversation started with it. My wife doesn't say things that she hasn't fully thought through. I haven't fully thought through things that I haven't yet said. So right there, there's a huge divide just on a base level of communication. And that's my wife that I love and I know really well, and vice versa. And we have our challenges with that. So just imagine the impact that this can happen with your team, with your vendors. If you're communicating with strategic partners, you need to be very clear and aware of the way you communicate. So what we really want to do is we want to focus on the certain awareness of the conversation. I almost want you to think about watching yourself communicate from the outside. So as I'm talking right this minute, I have a little uh, camera out here, I guess you could say, that's paying attention to the speed of my speech and what I am saying, how I am saying it. If I've got a lot of and those filler words in there, I want to be conscious of that. Now, if you go back and watch a bunch of my videos, you'll see there are times when I look like I'm completely unconscious of it. And that definitely happens sometimes. Sometimes I get a topic that's so exciting to tell you about that I throw all the communication stuff out the window because I'm really excited to talk to you about financials or about this or that. Like somebody who is thinking more about the content than the context. What I really want to do is I want to focus on the context, because the best idea in the world doesn't mean anything if it's not communicated effectively, or it's not to the level that it could be if it were communicated properly. So the first thing we want to do is remember to listen. Don't wait to talk. Listen. Very few times will somebody ever jump out at you in a conversation because you didn't react to what they said quick enough in the moment. Some of the best conversations that I've ever had is when I say something and the person who's listening pauses and says something like, "You know what, Foster? That's a really good point. Let me think about that for a minute before I respond." And then what am I doing? Oh, I'm listening even closer, right? So I'm not thinking about it. What do you mean you're thinking about it? You should just speak. Shoot, ready, aim. That's how we do it. I don't want that. I don't want to use a shotgun approach to communication. I want a sniper rifle, right? That's the kind of communication that's going to be effective for people. Almost like a call and response, but I want to make sure that I'm listening and taking it in, and I want to respond intelligently instead of react emotionally. So the idea is not to talk someone into submission. And in sales, a lot of people I know in sales have done this. I've done it myself. You talk yourself out of sales. Anybody who, and please comment, you're not alone here. Have you ever had a prospect say yes, and you keep talking and you talk them out of it? Whether or not you think you're reassuring them of their decision, or you're just talking to them about an important feature you forgot after they've said yes, and then you talk yourself out of the sale, or you talk them into a point of a buyer's remorse maybe, because you don't just keep it simple. Listen to their needs. When they've said yes, then you begin the closing process. Then you begin explaining to them what the next steps are, because for all intents and purposes, the sale starts when they say yes. That's when you've got to deliver on your product or service. That's when the onboarding starts. That's when the relationship really begins, when the credibility building becomes something significant. So don't talk your way out of it. Don't talk them out of it. Don't talk your way through it. Listen. Listen. So how do we do that? So first thing I mentioned, the first tool, have that voice, that second vantage point watching you at times while you're communicating. Now, don't get lost in that and not be able to focus on what you're saying because you're trying to think about how you're saying it. But just be conscious. Have an awareness of what you're saying, when you're saying it, how you're saying it. What is the timing? What is the cadence of your voice? Are you giving the other person an opportunity to speak? Which brings me up to my second point. I call it the 5-to-1 rule. For a lot of people like me, that's a lot, 5-to-1, and I'll explain. We'll call it the 3-to-1 rule. For every 3 minutes to 1 minute, I should be listening versus talking. So 3 minutes of listening, for 1 minute of talking. When I first heard about this, and I can't exactly remember where now, but the 5-to-1 ratio was given. And I remember thinking to myself going, 5 minutes of listening? What happens if there's a lull? It's okay. I don't have to fill every empty space with words, amazing as it might seem. So that's the second tool, right? It's the 3-to-1 model, we'll call it. The other thing is I want to think about intention. So preparation ahead of time. What am I doing going into this conversation? If I'm going into a conversation with my wife or my daughter, I want to make sure that my number one job is creating a safe emotional environment for them to express themselves. That's number one, the number one thing. And I know with my wife, it doesn't happen when I just throw out words at her, okay? Same thing with my daughter. If I'm not truly listening to her, it just, I can't possibly be aware and present in the way I have to be to communicate with her. The other thing that we want to remember is if I'm in a professional relationship, I'm going to have time usually leading up to a meeting. Sometimes I don't know if the phone rings, I don't know what I'm going to get. But if I've got an event that I'm going to, if I'm having a luncheon with somebody, if I set that up, and I'm talking here verbal exchanges, I mean, be very careful. Email and text are so dangerous. And this is not, new news for anybody. I cannot hear voice inflection. I can't get a level of presence from that written communication that I can even on the phone, let alone face to face. So when I am present, I know ahead of time if we're going to be in a face-to-face. I know pandemic and everything else, but things are beginning to shift, or at the very least Zoom. I mean, that's at least you can see. And by the way, if anybody Zooms with me, I watch eyes all the time. So I do that when I drive too, because I like to see if people are watching their phone. So if you look in people's rear view mirrors or side view mirrors, you can see their eyes looking down at their phone. It's ridiculous. Everybody does it. I'm not saying I never have, but really driving's my priority when I'm driving. It's not secondary to my phone. But it's the same thing when I'm watching people on Zoom. I like watch their eyes. I can see if they're darting off, checking messages, maybe trying to do the emails without looking like they're doing emails, right? And because I'm on Zoom all day long with my clients, and so I see that. So that's a little bit trickier, but when you're actually face-to-face with somebody, there are many different things. There are different tricks to networking and stuff. If you watch people's feet, the way their feet are standing, if they've got their feet pointing away from you, they're trying to exit the conversation. There's a lot of neuro-linguistic programming or NLP dealing with that. But when it comes to conversation, being present and listening, having an intention. I want to find out as much as I can about 4 people at this, industry event or something like that. Or if I'm at a top investor event and I'm with some of the movers and the shakers, I may have an intention of specific people I want to talk to, but at the very least, I want to say, I want to be about something. And I don't want to be about that guy who came and just couldn't shut up the whole night. Because I'm not learning anything about anybody else. And you know what people are learning about me? I don't know how to listen, I only know how to talk. Again, full disclosure, I've come out of these meetings before and my throat has hurt. Because all I did was got wrapped up in the moment. I got so excited, I started talking and it just didn't stop. So, but that was the old me. The new me, I love asking questions. Asking questions gives me more information about people. And you know what? If it really is the kind of relationship I want to extend, then there's nothing wrong with catching up after the fact or saying, hey, let's go grab a coffee or let's have a call, let's do a meeting or something. He said, I didn't hear, I love it when I come to the end of a conversation. They say, I didn't hear what I didn't get a chance to talk about you at all. I said, well, I'd love to tell you about me some other time. Let's sit down and figure that out. Right now, it's about, I want to take in, I want to learn. I want to meet other people and learn because there's more people out there and opportunities to change lives for me. I'm not going to change as many lives when I just go out there and just talk people to death. So, still a work in progress. And if anybody can relate, if anybody wants to reach out to me, you can share your experience. I'm happy to share more experience. I've got some more stories, not all great, but they're all things that I've learned from. So I hope you have a wonderful day, enjoying the Tokyo coffee. Hopefully you're expanding maybe some of the coffees that you've tried or you're drinking, like I'm trying to do. And I really appreciate you taking some time to invest in yourself. And unless you have other plans, I hope you have a great day. Thanks.